All right, so like I said, on page 295 today, and what we're going to be doing is using SSS, which is short for side, 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 and SAS, which is a postulate side, angle, side. We're going to use these to prove triangles are congruent and to write congruence statements. All right, we're going to use side, 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 and side, angle, side to prove triangles are congruent and then to write congruence statements. So SSS is short for side, 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 congruence. All right, and what it states is that if three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. If three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. So today you're going to be asked, are the triangles congruent? If so, write a congruence statement and explain. Now, you wrote congruence statements last week, you just didn't have to explain. Today, the explain means to just state whether you used side, side, side congruence or side, angle, side. So if we look at two triangles, and we've got AB congruent to AD, and BC is congruent to CD. And this picture's on the top of page 295. I'm sorry, 296. All right, so based on these markings, these tick marks, we've got two sides of the triangle up top congruent to two sides of the triangle on the bottom. It doesn't quite meet side, side, side yet, does it? But look at side AC. Isn't side AC the third side in both triangles? Couldn't you redraw these triangles and just separate them, and they're both going to have the same third side AC? Everybody see that? Okay. So I like to just put 3 tick marks on there, because that means that AC is congruent to AC. It's the same side of the triangle. So here's how this works. Are the triangles congruent? In this case, we have side, side, side of the top triangle congruent to side, side, side of the bottom triangle. So we're going to say yes. If so, write a congruent statement. I'm going to describe the triangle on top. We can use any order of the vertices. Okay, so I'm just going to call it ABC. Yes, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Now, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. So look, AB is the first 2 letters in our first description, agreed? And side AB is congruent to side AD, isn't it? All right, so we have to start our second description with AD. And then we went across this side with 2 tick marks. We went from B down to C, so we got to go from D down to C. So ABC is congruent to triangle ADC. Now, here's how you finish this, okay? The and explain is this simple. Yes, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ADC, and we just say by S, S, S. By side, side, side. Morning. And that means that 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of the second triangle. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. The one thing you can't do when you're doing these problems is assume that sides are congruent based on what they look like. So if we have another picture and it looks something like this, and this is maybe N, MN, O, and P, and we got a line going through the middle. And in this case, let's just say that MN is congruent to PO. That's all you're given. All right, so you've got this triangle up top here, MNO, and you've got another triangle down here on the bottom, MPO, and they share side MO, agreed? So we got MN congruent to PO, and MN, or I'm sorry, MO is in both triangles, so it's congruent to itself. But do we have a third side that's congruent? All right, M to P looks like it's congruent to N to O, but if there's no other information given and there's no tick marks on those 2 sides, then you don't know that they're congruent. All right, so in this case, are the triangles congruent? We're just going to say no. More information is needed. Yes.
Folder from the office.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so you have to know that 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of the other triangle in order to use side-side-side congruence. All right, so side-side-side is pretty clear. Any questions on side-side-side? All right, then you're going to look at the bottom of page 297. And we've got side angle side congruence. And this is just abbreviated SAS. And this states that if 2 sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to two sides and the included angle of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Two sides of one triangle and the 2 sides and the included angle of one triangle congruent to 2 sides and the included angle of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Now we're going to say right here, the interior angle formed by the congruent sides is an included angle. The interior angle formed by the congruent sides is an included angle. That means the angle that you're using to write the congruent statement must be formed by the 2 congruent sides. All right, and I'll show you some examples of both. So let's do this. Are the triangles congruent? If so, write a congruent statement. So let's take this triangle here. And we'll call it EFG. And then we got triangle MNO. And let's say you're given this information. EG is congruent to NO. Angle E is 70. Angle O is 70. And then E to F is 12. And O to M is 12. And you're asked, are the triangles congruent? If so, write a congruent statement and explain. So if you look at the triangle on the left, we have a side, an included angle, which is E, and a side. Triangle on the right, we've got a side, the included angle O, and a side that's 12 that are congruent to each other. Okay? So we have a side included angle congruent to a side included angle and a side. So the triangles are congruent. We can say yes. Triangle. Again, you can describe the triangle on the left or the first description in the congruent statement. You can go any order with the vertices. I'm going to go GEF. Triangle GEF is congruent to triangle. So if we went GEF in the first description, the congruent angle has to be in the middle of the second description, so the O's got to be in the middle. We went across the first side, we went across the side with one tick mark. All right, from an angle we didn't know to the angle we do know. So in this triangle on the right, we have to go across this side with one tick mark. We got to go from N to O. All right, so we go N, O, and got only one vertex left. So NOM. And then we can say our explanation is by side angle side congruence. And please just verify the order of your descriptions in your congruent statement. All right, if E is the congruent angle in the first description, then O has to be the congruent angle in the second description. And since E is in the middle, then O needs to be in the middle. All right, side GE is congruent to side NO. And we've got GE as the first two letters and NO as the first two letters. All right, so just be careful there. Make sure that you get your vertices in the correct places. Then take a look at these two triangles. And let's say on the left, this triangle is HIJ. And the triangle on the right is NFL. Now, we've got HI congruent to FL. Angle H congruent to angle F. And then H to J congruent to N to L. And I'm going to take that out of there. I'm going to move it to N. All right, so the question is, are the triangles congruent? If so, write a congruent statement and explain. Triangle on the left, you've got a side, agreed? A side, an included angle H, and a side. Is that congruent to a side, an included angle, and a side, triangle on the right? Do you see how the congruent angle on the right is not the angle formed by the side with 1 and 2 tick marks? Okay? So since angle L here is not an included side. It's not formed by the two sides that are congruent to the triangle on the left. Then we're going to say no. The triangles are not congruent. No. Okay. L, or angle L, is not an included angle. So the triangles are not congruent. All right, so any questions? All right, you don't need to write this down, but just be aware that if you get one of these bow tie problems, okay, and you get tick marks that are like here and here and here and here, and that's all the information that's given, you're expected to know that vertical angles are congruent to each other, okay? It may not be written in the problem. You may not be given the angle measure. You may not be given arc marks. But when you draw these diagrams, you're expected to know that this angle is congruent to this angle. Okay? Which gives you angles, side angle side and side angle side. You just then have to focus on the order of the vertices when you write the congruence statement. Questions? All right, then your practice for today is going to be on page, it's going to be, let's see, page 301, 17 through 20. Then 24, 25, and then on page 338, problem number 15. And you guys have 10 topics again this week.